Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Salvador, Venetia,
Here.
Concord,
I'm here.
Contra Costa County,
Recording in progress.
Contra Costa County,
Supervisor Joya has his hand up. He needs to be promoted.
thank you, Carter. Puerto Madera,
Here.
Danville,
Here.
El Cerrito,
Here.
Fairfax,
Here.
Fairfield, Hercules,
Here.
Lafayette,
Here.
Larkspur,
Here.
County of Marin, here, Martinez,
Present.
Mill Valley, Moraga, Napa, City of Napa,
Here.
County of Napa and four Napa cities,
Here.
Novato, Oakley,
Here.
Pinal,
Here.
Pittsburgh, Pleasant Hill,
Here.
Richmond, Ross, San Anselmo, here, San Pablo, here, San Rafael, San Ramon, Sausalito, here, Solano,
It's
Solano,
red. It says red right there.
Yes, I will get you.
Oh, red is on. Okay, that is okay.
Solano,
No red.
Tiburon, here, Vallejo,
Present.
Walnut Creek,
Here.
home established.
Thank you. First, on board announcements, I'd like to welcome the city of Hercules, and they will be attending for the first time. This is their very first meeting, and I want to welcome my longtime colleague, Director Bailey. Director Bailey, would you like to say a couple words?
Yeah, I prepared a 20-minute presentation here. No, just thank you guys. We're looking forward to working together as Hercules makes this this commitment in joining MCA. Thank you.
Welcome, Director Bailey. This time we have board announcements. Do we have any board announcements starting in Concord?
Yes, can I welcome also a new member, John McCormick, for the city of Lafayette?
Thank you very much.
And is that the Napa office? Any announcements?
No announcements here.
Thank you very much. So we will next go to public open time and discussion. The next item is that this is the opportunity for members of the public to comment on anything that's not on the agenda. We do have, do we have any members of the public in Concord who would like to speak at this time?
There's no one from the public in Concord.
There's one person on the phone in Concord. Go ahead.
No, this is Vic, and I was saying there is no one from the public in Concord.
Thank you. Are there any comments from members of the public here in Santa Fe? Thank you. Are there any comments from members of the public joining us on Zoom or any other location? So now we will have a report from our Chief Executive Officer. Hi, Josh. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be joining the meeting tonight. I wanted to also offer a warm welcome to our newest director, Dr. Bailey from Hercules, and also wanted to pass along the great news that the California Public Utilities Commission has approved MCE's revised implementation plan for the Hercules enrollment, which is scheduled for April 2025. So we're looking forward to working together on that. Next, I wanted to offer a big thanks for the letters of support that have been submitted for our federal earmark requests. Benicia, El Cerrito, Martinez, and Napa County all submitted letters of support. And then beyond our own member communities, we also received letters of support from State Senator Bill Dodd and from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We really appreciate that support, and we are excited to report that we've secured our fourth federal earmark for $850,000. Big thanks to Representative DeSaulniers' support for that. And we plan to use those funds for upgrading electric panels and doing the necessary work to help low-income families switch to clean electric appliances and electric vehicles. This is really exciting for us because it tackles a major hurdle to electrification, really making sure that everyone can be part of the move to clean energy without big barriers. So we're excited about that. I also wanted to provide an update on our 2024 earmark requests, which have been submitted. 4 requests have been submitted, totaling $5.3 million. The first is for $1.3 million, and it's for emergency water heater loaner program funds. It would offer temporary water heaters to customers who are waiting for the installation of efficient heat pump models. And this really helps folks transition from the fossil gas model to the new model with minimal disruption. So really excited about that. We also have a $1.4 million request for e-bike access and adoption. This will help provide low-income customers with e-bikes and also safety gear and education through community partnerships. So that's an exciting one. And then last of all, our restaurant electrification pilot program, which is a $1.3 million earmark request. This focuses on electrifying kitchens in underserved communities, improving health outcomes and aiding in decarbonization with support for participating restaurants and the creation of case studies to encourage broader adoption. So we'll keep you all posted as those earmark requests make their way through the process. Next, I wanted to let folks know how we're doing with our CARE and FERA enrollments. CARE and FERA are two income qualifying energy savings plans that we're actually going to talk a little bit more about this evening. But I wanted to let folks know that over the last 6 months, we've been running a really successful campaign to market CARE and FERA enrollments. We know there are many folks in our service area that haven't signed up for these great discount programs. And I'm really pleased to report an 11% enrollment rate, resulting in nearly 1,600 customers signing up just in the last 6 months. So we're excited to continue encouraging folks to sign up so they can take advantage of these rate savings programs. And then next, switching to some of our power supply, I wanted to provide a really exciting update that last month MCE joined a press conference to celebrate the completion of the Strauss Wind Project in Santa Barbara County. This is a 95 megawatt project, and it is the first wind project on California's coastline and created 150 good paying jobs, including union labor. These wind turbines are capable of powering 36,000 homes, and it will generate an estimated $47 million in tax revenue during its 30-year life cycle. It'll also provide annual income to ranchers who lease land to the wind farm, and it'll allow local agriculture operations to continue with minimal impact. So, really exciting project. And then shifting to the local level, we've got a big project to celebrate here. We're celebrating our latest solar feed-in tariff project, which is just under 1 megawatt, and it's called Fallen to Rock in Tamales in Marin County. And we'll be celebrating the completion of this project with a ribbon cutting on April 15th. So keep an eye out for press about that one. Next, I wanted to let folks know that MCE issued our annual supplier diversity report, which is highlighting $44 million invested in diverse, small, and local businesses in 2023. Really exciting results. And this is a report that's really an easy read, lots of good graphics and photos. So if you haven't taken a spin through it yet, I highly recommend it. It also highlights the Certify and Amplify event that we run at least once a year, where we help folks in our service area and beyond get signed up as a diverse business. And this helps us contract with them and spread the word, and also helps make sure that they can amplify their business. And I see Supervisor Joya, you've got your hand up. We can now see you, so it looks like you've been elevated to panelist.
Richmond and Contra Costa have been here from the beginning, Mayor Martinez and myself. But to note, I would suggest checking with legal counsel. It's been the general counsel for the Air District has opined that you legally can't start a meeting if all your remote sites are not up and accessible. So there are other sites that are not accessible. I just suggest you look at that. That's the general counsel from the Air District has opined that for our regional meetings.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Joy. We will look into that, and we will also adjust the roll call to note that you have been here since the beginning. And then I had just two more quick updates. I wanted to let folks know that we are working on a very exciting solar plus storage project with the Pittsburgh Unified School District. And this is part of our community resiliency efforts that have been underway for a good, 3 or 4 years now. We've provided $715,000 in incentives to the Pittsburgh Unified School District for energy storage projects at 10 of their school campuses. And just yesterday, we celebrated the groundbreaking of the last installation with the school district and Chair Scales Preston. The solar storage projects are projected to save the school district $2.6 million in the first 7 years. So really exciting project. And last of all, I want to note that our chair, Scales Preston, is receiving an award tonight down in San Mateo, and that is why we are not seeing her on screen now. She may be able to join for part of the meeting, but we're very excited that she's being honored as MCE's chair. And that's it for my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Don. Questions? I see Director Kohler. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just an easy one. I was wondering, you mentioned that certain cities sent support letters for earmarks. I don't recall seeing a call out for that with a template letter, and we would have been happy to do that. So if for some reason we didn't get on the distribution list, please include us. We can do that as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Director Kohler. Yeah, we may have been targeting certain communities, but we'll circle back to our legislative team and make sure that they know. We really appreciate your willingness to always provide support in ways like that.
Okay, any other questions over there in Concord? Any questions? How about in Napa? Any questions?
No questions in Napa.
Thank you. El Cerrito?
No questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other comments from members of the public? Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, sure.
Director Paulson. Go ahead.
I got a text. Someone has tried to make public comment and their hand wasn't recognized. So I know it's out of order, but because you're when you get a chance.
Sure. Thank you very much. Director Dodd.
So can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. So one of the things that Dawn did not say is that she's actually joining us from a very important conference where she's representing MCE and she's in Europe. So that is amazing, amazing dedication. And I just wanted to say how grateful we are to have you as our leader. And all the items you mentioned, would not have happened without you and without the staff here at MCE. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for bringing that up. It is very exciting. I'm in the UK and we'll be learning about wind power and other technologies that are being used out here. There's a lot of exciting offshore wind happening actually up in the northern part of Scotland, where they have very deep water, similar to California, and the wind technology up there is floating wind turbines on the offshore coast. So I'll be learning a bit about how they handle the port construction and the assembly of turbines in deep water, as we have a lot of goals in California to follow that template. So I look forward to returning with some lessons learned.
Sure. Thank you. Just, I believe, one question.
Yes. For a member of the public.
And we have one here in the Senate. Public comment.
Hi, can you hear me? Great. Actually, I had my hand raised to make a comment during the public comment period. Should I make it now or wait till the completion of this item?
I still have to make that point.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead and make that now.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. So good evening, everyone, board members and staff. My name is David Mahler. I'm with the Marin Sonoma Building Electrification Squad and the Marin Sonoma Electric Vehicle Squad, two policy action squads comprised of more than 100 mostly Marin County residents. The mission of the two squads is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by accelerating building electrification and the transition to electric vehicles. I'd like to recommend that MCE consider establishing a formal community advisory committee or repurpose the existing Community Power Coalition into one. It seems that to date, the Community Power Coalition has been used primarily as an opportunity for MCE to communicate out to the community, but it has been underutilized as an opportunity for the community to develop meaningful input and to communicate that input back to MCE's decision makers. What I'm talking about establishing is the kind of community advisory committee that many of your jurisdictions utilize to solicit and aggregate community input and provide that input in a formal manner to the decision makers. Such advisory committees often include one or two of the decision makers, as well as one or more staff members for support. They meet on a regular basis with an agenda and staff reports to make sure committee members are well informed and have the necessary background information to make solid recommendations. With MCE serving 4 counties with diverse communities, priorities, issues, and perspectives, it's unrealistic to think that holding a casual outreach meeting once every couple of months with a limited and varying cast of attendees is going to result in high-value engagement and input. Thank you very much for considering this recommendation.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yes. Hi. Can you all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello. My name is Dr. Bonnie Hamilton. I am a resident of Fairfield in Solano County, and I am happily a customer of MCE, so appreciate what you're doing. And great minds think alike, because I had actually the same request that the previous speaker had, that MCE consider establishing a formal community advisory committee. I, as a citizen and a customer, I think it's really important to have more input from our people, our communities. And I think it's really important for engagement, and our input is so important. So anyway, I just want to I guess I would echo what the previous speaker said, and just want to share that. That's all. Thank you. And maybe I do have a comment later on for another issue that's on your agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions?
I see the raised hand online, Vice Chair.
Okay. How about over there in Concord? Any questions? Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on then, and we'll go to the consent calendar. And we have C1, approval of the 2/15/2024 meeting minutes. C2, approval of the contracts for energy update, and C3, proposed full amendment for second agreement with Energy Solutions. Would anyone like to pull anything? Do I hear a motion?
It's actually a full
Oh,
item C1.
C1, anyone else? Let's go ahead and do I hear a motion for C2 and C3 to approve?
So second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Welcome, Belvedere. Sorry to interrupt. Could we just repeat who was the first and who was the second, just so we have for the record?
I believe first was Madeira. Second was Tiburon.
Thank you. And then Belvedere is a yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Venetia,
Yes.
Concord,
Yes.
Contra Costa County,
Yes.
Puerto Madera, Danville,
Yes.
El Cerrito,
Yes.
Fairfax,
Yes.
Fairfield, Hercules,
Hercules, I'm not sure if I can vote, but yes, if it's acceptable. Okay. All
yes.
right, thank you. So yes.
Thank you. Lafayette,
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
County of Marin,
Yes.
Martinez,
Yes.
City of Napa,
Yes.
County of Napa and Four Napa cities,
Yes.
Oakley,
Yes.
Chenal,
Yes.
Pleasant Hill,
Yes.
San Anselmo,
Yes.
Richmond is here.
Richmond,
Yes.
San Pablo,
Yes.
Sausalito,
Yes.
Tiburon,
Yes.
Vallejo,
Aye.
Walnut Creek.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. We will now go to that is C1 that was removed from consent. We now open it up to questions, comment, and discussion. And we'll go to Triple.
Thank you. So it's very simple. Unfortunately, I did not join you at that meeting, so I will be abstaining on the approval of the minutes.
Do item C1 approval. Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
And we have a motion by Porter Madera and a second by Lawrenceburg. Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Belvedere? Yes. Manisha?
Yes.
Concord?
Yes.
Contra Costa County?
Yes.
Puerto Madera?
Yes.
Danville?
Yes.
El Cerrito?
Yes.
Fairfax?
Yes.
Hercules?
Yes.
Lafayette?
Yes.
Larkspur?
Yes.
County of Marin?
Yes.
Martinez?
Yes.
City of Napa?
Yes.
County of Napa and Four Napa cities?
Yes.
Oakley?
Yes.
Pinal?
Yes.
Pleasant Hill?
Yes.
Richmond?
Yes.
San Anselmo?
Yes.
San Pablo?
Yes.
Sausalito?
Yes.
Tiburon?
Abstain.
Vallejo?
Aye.
Walnut Creek?
Yes, I think County of Solano is here. I think there was confusion about whether or not they're here, so you might want to make sure you call them in the roll.
Solano?
Yes, on both. The previous 2 and 3 and now 1.
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. We'll move on. Item 6 is proposed fiscal year 2024-25 budget discussion and action. The next item is the proposal, the fiscal year of the 2024-25 budget. Presenting this will be MCE's CFO, Garth Salisbury, as well as MCE's Manager of Finance, Marin Strauss. This item will be presented to our was presented to our executive committee on March 6th, and move to recommend approval to the board. Please go ahead, Garth.
Thank you, Director Quinto. Let's see. I want to make sure everyone can hear me because, again, I don't think these microphones are working. So just speak towards that laptop over there. Okay, that's what I'll do.
We can hear you just fine, Garth.
Great, great. So before we get started, I would like to thank the finance staff, in particular, Mike Strauss, Efren Oxlage, and Justin Pluto for all the work to get us to this point. Also, others, in particular from the HR department as well, have worked very hard, particularly since the executive committee meeting to get us to this point today. So additionally, each of the department heads are either here today or available over Zoom. If any questions come up about the budget. Also, I believe John Valesi is here from Pacific Energy Advisors to answer any questions about assumptions in next year's budget regarding renewable energy, ISO energy, and resource adequacy, as well as some customer demand assumptions that might come up. So we have a lot to get through tonight. So I request that we will break up this budget a little bit and stop at different points to allow the board to ask any questions. I'm hopeful that as we get through each section, some of your questions will be answered. Next slide. Okay, so a quick summary. The proposed fiscal 2024-25 operating fund budget allows MCE to continue to provide customers with 60 to 100% renewable energy and 95% GHG-free energy. We continue to provide cost savings to our customers, even with this far superior mix of renewable and GHG-free energy. We saved customers over $100 million over the last 2 years and project saving customers over $30 million this year under our current rates. The budget is projected to produce about $52 million to our operating fund and to reach our reserve policy goals, assuming no revenue deferrals or significant transfers for capital investments. So now I'll turn it over to Jamie Tuckey, MCE's Chief of Staff, to talk about a proposed targeted cost relief program.
Thanks so much. Good evening, board. It's great to be here with you tonight, and thanks especially to those in Santa Fe who are bearing with us with the flashing mics and the sound, but I think we've got it under control now. Before we get into the details of the proposed operating budget, we wanted to take a moment and talk a little bit about the, actually, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Talk a little bit about the targeted cost relief program that staff is recommending to the board. So all of us are acutely aware of the rising cost of energy that we have been experiencing. And despite the fact that MCE is able to offer lower rates to our customers and has been offering lower rates for quite some time now, which is really nice to be able to let customers know when they call us have questions about their bill, that they are saving with MCE. And not only are they saving, but they're getting a cleaner energy product, and a portion of their rates are being reinvested in their hometowns, which is a pretty wonderful thing. But despite the savings, we know that the costs have been increasing, and there are lots of people in our community who are still struggling to pay their bills. And we think we have an opportunity to really put some of our core values of community care, energy affordability, and equity into action by creating a targeted cost relief program. With an allocation of $5 million, we could run a program for 1 year, assuming it would start in May. And with that, staff would recommend a $20 monthly credit for our vulnerable residential customers and a $25 monthly credit for small and medium-sized businesses. When we are talking about our residential customers and who are vulnerable, we're specifically talking about folks who have a lower income. And we know who many of those people are because they are eligible for an existing discount program that we offer to our customers, CARE or FARA. And we're also thinking about customers who are behind on their bills and are in arrears. Next slide. So if we look at putting this program into action, we would suggest automatically enrolling our most vulnerable customers. And those are customers who have a lower income and an arrear or past due amount of more than $500. And the reason that these customers are a priority is because they're the ones who are most likely to experience a power shutoff from PG&E. And we really want to prevent anyone in our service area from having to live in a home where they don't have electricity. So by offering them this credit, we can help them get out of arrears. We know those folks are the ones who really need it. There's also a program that's existing called the Arrearage Management Program, and this would be a supplement to that. It's eligible for folks who are on a low income, are in arrears, but to be in this program, which is a debt forgiveness program, you have to start paying your bill on time. So this would support them in doing that. For the other customers, we would suggest doing a marketing campaign directly to the other low-income homes in our service area and also to small and medium-sized businesses. We project that that could result in another 26,000 low-income homes enrolling and about 1,300 small and medium businesses. And that would be over the course of the year. And for those two customer brackets, since they would be voluntarily enrolling, we have entered in assumptions about how many folks we think would enroll per month based on previous programs and efforts that we've used to market our customers. So with these estimates in total, we are thinking that we could help 39,000 homes and businesses in our service area with monthly discounts for the next year. And that would be at a cost of just under $5 million. And so like Gar said, there's a whole lot that we're talking about today in this meeting, but I wanted to give you a high level overview of what staff is recommending for this program. And I'll pause and see if there are any questions or comments from the board before handing it back over to the finance team.
Hey, any questions? Director Wilkinson.
Jim, just wanted to ask a question. What share of all customers qualify on your modeling for these types of programs?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I would love to invite our Director of Customer Operations, Zay Perrin, to respond to that. Zay, let me know if you need to.
Jamie, sorry, this is Vicken. We could not, could the question be repeated, please? We could not hear it here.
So you just have to speak loud.
I can repeat the question. Tell me if I got it wrong. The question was, what share of our customers qualify for each of these three categories that we talked about? Is that correct? Just in aggregate. What percentage of our customers would this apply to, would be eligible for this? And Zay, I'm punting that to you.
Hi, everyone. Zay Perrin, Director of Customer Operations. That would be just over 20% of our customers. That are eligible.
Yeah, I guess just to continue on with the question, I'm curious about the numbers, the choice of 5 million, and it's more the penetration of the low income customers. So 20,000 out of 37 districts, how many percent of these people are we reaching? Is that a full amount or is that a partial amount?
Do you mean like how many people spread across each community, or can you? Well,
in the the number of customers that we have that are considered vulnerable, what's that number?
How many vulnerable customers do we have? I believe we have about 100,000 residential customers who are enrolled in CARE or FARA. So we know that they're lower income and are designated as such.
So are we constrained to using 5 million?
We are not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm bringing it up. I went to the CPUC meeting today, and there was an hour and a half of public comment on this issue. And it's one of the biggest issues right now. So, just reflecting on that, and from what I've heard, I would consider reaching more customers.
Okay. I want to make sure, can you ask if folks on Concord can hear us? I want to make sure everyone got that.
Concord can hear, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I was just going to add one item to that question. From our vulnerable customers that we're talking about, the 100,000+, those that are most vulnerable within that portion are the 11,500 that we're talking about automatically enrolling. So we would encompass 100% of the most vulnerable 10% of the overall arching 20%.
Thank you.
Director, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to say how excited I am about this. I talked a little bit earlier about how our very professional staff is always forward thinking. And, part of our core values here at MCE are not only community care and sustainable energy access. So this program is actually targeting people who really, really need our help, people and small businesses. And I think that is really what we stand for. I like the fact that you're starting it off, for a year and looking to see how it goes. And then we can add more money in the future. And I'm just very excited about this. Keeping the lights on in even one person's home makes such a huge difference, that we are making a difference with this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a hand up with looks like Director Fong in Hong Kong. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Good morning.
Yeah, and hopefully I'm coming in fine on the audio. I do have a couple of questions. One, I'm very supportive of this type of targeted program, but I'm wondering why we just don't have it as an opt-out. I mean, the dollars aren't big, the benefits are great, and why don't we just have it as an opt-out program rather than asking that it be an opt-in? That's question number one. Number two, and I'm tagging on to, I think, an earlier question, which is this represents about 20% of our total user base. What are we doing? And maybe you have a subsequent slide or slides that will present, benefits that would be, applied or valued to the other 80% of our population base.
Yeah. I can go ahead and respond to that. So I'll start with your second question about the other 80% of our customer base. And I will say, I mentioned this earlier, but I want to emphasize that we already have lower rates compared to PG&E. We've had lower rates since 2022. We don't anticipate a need for another rate adjustment again this year, so we will continue to have lower rates for our customers. A typical residential customer saves about $7 a month with us, whereas a small medium business saves about $15 a month. And then just cumulatively across our customer base, we've saved $100 million between 2022 and 23, and anticipate another $30 million in savings this year. In addition to the rate savings, we also have lots of really cool programs for our customers that provide incentives or rebates if they want to do upgrades in their homes. Those rebates are tiered, so if you're lower income, we might have offerings where there's no out-of-pocket costs for customers who want to electrify their appliance or do other home upgrades. So there are a lot of other benefits that we're also providing to our customers. I think we have something like 15 to 20 different programs for our customers spanning across vehicle electrification, home electrification, energy storage, and that list goes on and on. So I would say those are the standard things that we are offering for the majority of our customers. And then your second question was, I think, why not auto enroll everyone on this list? And I think that is something that could be considered, but we would need to take a look at the numbers to see what that would end up costing. Specifically, if we were just looking at the auto enrolling all of the residential customers who were on Care or Fair, which is the discount programs, we would be looking closer to 25 million or 26 million for a 1-year discount.
Okay, and I appreciate you being conservative and wanting to make sure you walk before you run on these programs. My only comment to that is, with the challenges that small and medium businesses are having right now just to survive in general, anything we can do or the more we can do to support them and help support their continued success, I think is important. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you for your questions.
Okay, let's go to Concord there. Any questions?
Yeah, this is Mayor Zorn from Martinez. I had 2 questions. Does the presenter know what percentage of an average bill, $20 or $25 is?
An average bill for a low-income customer is $107. So a $20 discount would just be under 20%. And we'll clarify that that's specifically for the MCE portion of the bill. So that's not accounting for gas or PG&E delivery charges.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for clarifying, because the large, I think, well, at least on my bill, I was looking this up just to double check because I couldn't remember off the top of my head. So the PG&E electric delivery charges is about twice that of MCE's generation charges. So there's still a big chunk of money that these folks are going to have to pay. So just, I think this is great. I just want to make sure that we're understanding what $20 is and is not to the people who are going to get the discount.
And one clarifying aspect to that, the $107 is in respect to all residential customers. Our Care customers average $102 total bill. So it is a 20% discount for these specific customers for care fare.
Great. And then one other quick question. So at the beginning, Dawn was referring to federal earmarks, and then she was also making reference to care and fare. Are any of the earmarks that were received contributing to this $5 million funding?
No.
I have a
Many of
question.
the earmarks are supporting programs and offerings for our lower income customers, but none of them are specifically for cost relief on the bills.
So I have an additional question with regards to the $500 in arrearage. Do we know how many customers that is?
Yes, it is 11,510 customers are enrolled in the care or fare discount program and have an arrear of at least $500.
Okay, that's a lot. That's a big number. Thank you.
Any other questions from Concord office?
No further questions.
Okay, thank you, Vivian. How about El Cerrito or Napa? Or any of the other offices?
No, not.
Okay, thank you very much.
None.
Yes, Director, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. We're doing this obviously because it's the right thing to do, but there's a broader policy initiative at play here. So my understanding is that the property advocates were one of the big reasons why the solar incentives were actually withdrawn from CPUC because it disincentivized how lower income individuals were treated and put a greater burden on them. Assemblyman Connolly, who we all know well, recently introduced a new piece of legislation that would help address some of that. What are we doing to participate in the broader policy dialogue so that this is just a critical but preliminary foundational effort so that we can continue to push for that support legislation that we're seeing from our representatives and see the bigger picture so that doesn't get lost in the good work that you're doing. It is part of a big dialogue.
We have a policy team who works extensively on these issues, and I don't know if anyone from the policy team is in Concord, and if not, I would ask Dawn, I would invite Dawn to respond to that. And if you need us to repeat the question, we're happy to.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. We are aware of the bill that was referenced, and definitely we were very engaged in sharing some of the thoughts that we provided earlier when the CPUC was considering making changes to the net energy metering structure. I just want to remind folks that are listening and on our board that the rules that apply to PG&E and the other IOUs for net energy metering do not also apply to CCAs, and so there's not a direct impact on our side of the bill, but certainly we are very supportive of providing a structure that ties our load and generation shape more closely together, because that helps de-risk the energy purchasing and helps make the grid stronger. And so, our engagement on this issue has really been to support adding storage wherever solar is installed, both on a residential scale or small commercial scale, or even at a larger scale, and that alone can do a lot to really de-risk the grid, de-risk some of the procurement activities that are underway. So I think it's an issue that goes that's kind of above and beyond the discussion, the scope of the discussion here on our budget, but it's certainly something that we do talk about from time to time when we're having policy updates and as the legislative session unfolds, and I'm sure that will be part of our discussion in future meetings. But do feel free to follow up with our policy team if you'd like more information on our engagement with that bill.
Okay, I believe we can move on. Garth, go ahead. Do you have anything else in your presentation?
Not on this topic.
Okay.
We got a lot more though.
Yes.
Yeah. Sit back and relax. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so we will be presenting 4 budgets today for the consideration of the operating fund budget, which is the big one and the one from which the other 3 budgets are created: the Program Development Fund, the Resiliency VPP Fund, and last but certainly not least, the Energy Efficiency Fund. So first, I'd like to get started on the operating fund budget. And next slide. So there's a lot of numbers up here, and I want to try to allow you to focus just on the ones we're really going to be talking about. So I'll bring them in. So that green line you see running across, that is representing, so the current fiscal year is the first column, and the projected, the budgeted electricity revenue number after uncollectibles was, the budget was 800 million. So far this fiscal year, and we project through the end of the fiscal year, our actual revenues after uncollectibles to be about 755 million. And for next year's budget, we are budgeting and projecting revenues of 787 million. So a slight, actually a slight reduction from last year's budget, but an increase over our actuals that we're experiencing this year. So again, sales volume is projected to increase by 4.5% over current year actuals. And again, and the net energy revenue is adjusted downward by assumed delinquency rate of 1.5%. So we actually reduced it from 2% to 1.5% this year, down to, which should be about 12 million uncollectibles. Next slide. So the next big budget line item is the cost of energy. So, and this was, we saw some pretty big changes from our budget this year. So we had budgeted, we had budgeted about 666 million. And now we project that our actual energy costs for this year be closer to 566 million. And I'll go into some detail about talking about that, but what we're seeing and projecting for next year is actually an increase in energy over our current budget, energy costs of up to about $689 million. What we've been seeing is renewable energy premiums have quadrupled, resource adequacy costs have doubled, and these costs are captured in next year's budget. Revenue and cost of energy reflect a return to average temperatures. What we experienced this fiscal year was much cooler temperatures. A cooler summer, actually a milder winter, and for all those reasons, we saw much lower revenues, and also, and helpfully, which was helpful, was lower cost of energy. So next slide. So I'm going to take a second and talk about that a little bit, really kind of compare what we're experiencing this year and what we're projecting for next year. So kind of hard to read this graphic, but really, if you look at the numbers down in the box, down in the lower left, in fiscal year 22-23, the average CAISO cost of energy is about $104. This year, it's been about $54. Again, reflective of that demand. We have a lot of hydro this year. We project having a lot of hydro next year as well. But almost half in terms of just your average CAISO energy. Projection going forward is that we're going to return to sort of average temperatures in our service area, and that CAISO prices will be closer to $77. So that's really what's driving our cost estimates away from our contracts, is that estimate that we're going to see, not what we experienced 2 years ago, but we're going to see something a little bit closer to what is average for our service area. Next slide. did want to take a second and talk a little bit about some of the things that are impacting us negatively. And that first graphic, I don't have to look so much at the numbers, but these are the lower line is where resource adequacy cost, which is sort of backup energy, if you will, was at somewhere around $38 or so. By June of last year, it was over $60. And by January of this year, it was over $80. So we have to purchase this. A number of years ago, resource adequacy cost us around $16 million a year. Now it's costing us well over $100 million. So this again is built into that budget. Importantly for MCE and our mission, renewable energy prices. If you look at that graphic on the right, in January of 2023, renewable energy is about $20. The premium for renewable energy. By mid-year in July, it was pushing $40, and now it's over $60, over $70. So any additional renewable energy the MCE has to buy to hit our targets for renewable energy, that's what we're paying in the marketplace. Next slide. So I wanted to, again, take another second just to put some numbers around what was in the current year's budget, what we're actually expecting for energy costs, and then looking at what we're expecting for the next year. So again, we assumed in our budget we're going to have energy costs of around $666 million. In fact, it's about $100 million less than that, $566 million. But what's made up this difference? Next slide. So first is reduced sales. As I mentioned, we had much cooler weather. Those reduced sales represented about $44 million in the cost of energy. Because we didn't have to buy high-cost energy during heat waves or heat events, this actually saved us about $44 million from our budgeted cost. Another one is open position. We go into every year pretty much covered and having been hedged for the whole year, but sometimes there's little pieces, depending upon demand, that is not perfectly hedged. That's what we call an open position. And we assumed based on forward ISO prices at the time that was going to cost us about $23 million to fill those gaps. When in fact, we had very low ISO prices, so we didn't experience that cost. Heat event. We had a heat event contingency of about $20 million in the budget. We had a heat event in 2 out of the previous 3 years. So we budgeted one for this year. We didn't have that. So that was about $20 million. And finally, it was just pure power supply costs. And those related to projects that we weren't coming online. So we had assumed replacement energy there. And that we didn't really experience that. And again, the PPA delays as well for another $3 million. So that really breaks down where the cost actually ended up and what the difference was from the budget that didn't actually happen in the current fiscal year. But next year, again, we expect to go back to normal temperatures. We expect to go to higher ISO prices and normal weather patterns. And so, and again, those higher costs for renewable energy and RA, and that's what's reflected in that $689 million budget for next fiscal year. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Maida Strauss. I'm going to go through the operating fund budget line items, and then I'll pick it up again after that. Maida?
Thank you, Garb. So I hope, thanks, Dan. Hope everyone can hear me okay. So now we're going to go to the next section on the operating fund budget. So the operating fund budget is the attachment B of this item in the packet in case you want to follow through there. So the first item is the personnel. And for the approved budget, in the first column there in gray is the approved budget for this current year that ends in the end of this month. The next column is the projected. The following is the proposed budget, the one in discussion today. Then the next one is the variance from the approved budget to the proposed budget. And the last column is the percentage of net electricity revenue. So the percentage of this budget line to the net electricity revenue that Garb just described. So in the personnel line, we are proposing a 22.8 million budget for personnel. And this is a net of a 4 million allocation of MCE staff time to the CPUC funded programs. The increase that we are proposing is reflective of cost of living adjustments to salaries, also to benefits, promotions, a budgeted merit increase, fully integrating the full year's cost of new full-time employees added last year, and the anticipated addition of 7 new full-time staff over the course of the next fiscal year. This would increase our headcount from 96 to 103, plus an average of 16 interns, 2 fellows, 3 temp employees, and 1 part-time staff. And this is to fulfill MC strategies to increase our operational capacity, strategic in-house expertise, employee satisfaction, and market competitiveness. So now we can follow to the breakdown of the 19.1%. Please note that the breakdown of this variance was adjusted from the staff report they first received, and it was recirculated to board members through email. And the adjustment was due to tighten up on projections, assumptions, including a reduction on benefit percentage due to a removal of a proposed compensation program that staff is considering and may bring to this active committee at a later date this year. So I'll give you a moment to go through the breakdown from the screen. Sorry, I'm not used to speaking so loudly like that. Next slide, please. So now we're moving on to talk about our data manager. So here, the data manager is our analytics and management behind customer billing. This is the second full year of successfully having SMUD as our data management provider. Costs are pretty much flat from the approved to the proposed. Next slide, please. Technical and scheduling consultants. So the approved budget for this, we are requesting no change on this budget line. And this budget line is mostly for, it's all for Pacific Energy Advisors, PEA, and also Z Global. They are our energy consultants who work on predicting our daily and hourly load and to respond to new regulatory mandates. Service fees from PG&E. Again, those are fees that are calculated on a per meter basis. And then the small increase is due to a small increase in accounts for meters served in our area. Moving on to legal and policy. Here we have our external legal counsel expenses to support MCE's activities. This line is expected to decrease slightly because of increase in house capacity and also the continued support from CalCCA. Communication service budget line. This line we have, we expect an increase, and in this line encompasses advertising, customer notices, program marketing, community outreach, and special events. The expected increase is for marketing support to our growing customer programs, community education, and the Hercules 2025 enrollment. Other professional services. So in this line, we encompass certain expenses such as accounting, auditing, building upgrades and maintenance, consultants related to the development and maintenance of our customer relationship management software, and also the data analytics platform. The increased costs are due to new initiatives and investments in MCE's infrastructure, including the continued development and maintenance of our CRM and DAP, and also cross-departmental team trainings. Thanks, Dan. General and administration. There's also, this one includes recruitment tools, dues and subscriptions, software licenses, marketing technologies, and also the support from Call CCA. In this line, we are proposing a large increase, which is associated with increased regulatory and legislative activities, increases in Call CCA dues, license for our CRM, our DAP, our data analytics platform, load optimization tools, and other platform license that's used by all the departments at MC. Now we are in our occupancy. This is the leases of San Rafael and Concord offices. We have a slight increase, and the increased costs are expected due to a return to our annual increases in our planned rent schedule. So we had a little, we could negotiate a little discount before, and now we are going back to our planned rent schedules. This last one is the contingency. So we don't add any contingency to other lines. The only line that has contingency in our operating budget is this line, and we are proposing a no change. So now we have all this, the middle piece of attachment being in front of you with all the budget lines that we just went over together. And we are proposing an increase from 39.6 million to 45.5 million in the budget. And that would represent a 14% increase, and it would represent a 5.8% of our net electricity revenue. And also, I'll just go over some net electricity revenues for this portion. So last year we had where we have 5.8%. Last year was a 5%. The year before was 5.8, and then before that 6.8, 6.9, and 6.2. So the average has been 6.1 for the total operating expenses to our net electricity revenue. Next slide, then. So we are going to move on to the non-operating revenues. So here we have the first line is our grant receivables for grant income. So we're expecting 5 million for grants this coming year. And I would like also to touch on the second column where we have this other income. You might be wondering what the my income is all about. This was damages and the security for damages from one of our developers. Non-operating expenses. Okay, so here we have 225 for banking fees and financing costs. This is mostly for our credit facility. And then here is where we show our grant expenses. So all the expenses related to grants, they might show up in other budget lines such as other services, personnel, and so on. But then they get back to us on our non-operating expenses on this line, on grant income and then the grant expenses. Next clip, please. Okay, here we have the details on our grants that we're expecting to receive. So the total amount is 11.6 million. And some of those grants, they are multi-year grants. So on the second column, you see the timeline for where we're going to receive those grants. And that really changes depending on when can we actually do the work and start the work. So having this timeline from when the grant starts to end is very helpful. And so I'm just going to go over some of the grants. We have Healthy Homes, EV charging, green access, storage from nonprofits, storage for critical facilities, and virtual power plant.
Can I ask a question? A couple slides back, I was confused. The grant income was 5 million, the grant expenses was over 5 million. Is that annualized? Because I'm not sure this kind of net out to zero. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, sure. So they net out to zero because we might receive the funds, but we can't realize the funds if we don't spend the funds. So in other words, we might have received the money into our bank account, but until we can actually spend the money for the grant program, we can't realize in our books.
So when you have grant income, that's realized and spent money. So there might be more accumulating, which is now sort of it's an extra savings or reserve, or is that what you're saying?
No, it's just that we might have the money in our bank account, but we might have received from the grantor, but we can only put in our books when we are actually spending the money. Let's say something happened and we are not going to do the program, we got to give the money back to the grantor.
Yeah,
Thanks. Director Kohler has a question.
Go ahead, Director Kohler.
Thank you. A question I have, and maybe it's something I'm misunderstanding, but we have a little over $11 million in grants, and it costs us over $5 million. Expenses on grants, does that match, or is that it costs us $5 million to manage all these grants?
Let me try to explain it in some better words. So we have 11.6 is the total of grants for all those that timeline in the second column. So 11.6, for example, the first one is from 2023 to 2027. We received 3 million for that.
No, I understand what the grants are, but if you go back to the previous slide where you show grant expenses, you have over $5 million in expenses for grants. And I'm asking what the expenses are. Are those match, or that it costs us $5 million to manage a little over $11 million in grants?
It's just the expenditures, but if you go to the...
Oh, okay, so they're expenditures.
Exactly, yeah. If you go to the grant income, it's the exactly same amount.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Fong has handed.
Okay, let's go back to Hong Kong with Director Fong. Go ahead. Director Fong, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Question I have, and I know I asked it at the executive committee meeting, which was there's several that are at risk in term in 2024, 2025. What's the probability of risk that we won't have a sustainable support for many of these initiatives? Because obviously it's great to have the seed money, but it's more important that we have income or operating dollars available to sustain these programs for the longer term. And secondly, the second question is, if we do lose these grants, what is the reduction in the grant expenditures that would be applied?
I'm happy to respond to that if that would be helpful. Alice may also want to weigh in, but I just want to clarify that the grants that we apply for and that you see listed here are pretty specific to a period of time where we want to offer a specific program. We do not anticipate in our budget the need to continue all of these programs, indefinitely. The ones that are that we find to be, working really well, we will continue looking for new sources of funding. Others are filling a need that we see as kind of time bound. For example, getting our virtual power plant funds. We're doing a pilot program now in Richmond that we're hoping to expand to another community or other communities in the future, and we'll be looking for new sources of funding for that. EV charging for multifamily is another example of where we're kind of trying. It's a walk before you run type of approach where we're trying something out that we may be able to expand in the future. And then there are other programs that are more time limited, like the Healthy Homes program in Richmond is one that we took advantage of because there was a pool of funds out there that was a really good fit for something that we wanted to do anyway. So I just want to clarify that these are not all things that need to continue indefinitely, but the ones that we see having the greatest impact, we will certainly look for ways to continue to have them grow.
Great. Thank you, Don.
And this is Alice, if I could just add on to that. The grants that you see on the screen here are one component of the funding for our customer programs, but they sort of pale in comparison to the funding that we get from the Public Utilities Commission through the public purpose funds. So currently we have over $150 million awarded through 2031. And we've been funded at approximately the same level annually since 2018. So we have a lot of confidence that that funding will continue even past the current cycle that has been awarded. So while and that's a little bit different than a grant, it's kind of, funding that we have a different level of access to. So while the grants on the screen, are significant, they tend to fund shorter term projects. And the vast majority of our programs work is coming from that longer term CPUC funding.
Okay. Which tags on to the question of what are you all doing, knowing that the Inflation Reduction Act has got quite a few dollars that's going to be granted. What is your plan in 2024, 2025 to secure some dollars from that particular act?
So a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act funding is coming from the federal government to the California state government, and then will be distributed. And so our team, the programs team, the policy team, we have been engaged at the California Energy Commission, where a lot of that money will be flowing through to help shape the application that they'll be submitting to the federal government to make sure that it helps meet what we see as the most important goals, and that it is they're asking for the money in a way that we can make use of it. And then we're preparing to apply for some of that funding once it is awarded to California and they release solicitations to distribute it within California.
Yeah, that's great that you got your arms around this, because my understanding is there's $700 billion that's available for distribution. And, I think the opportunity is how do we secure some of that to support what we need to do here. Well, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? In Concord, El Cerrito?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is Supervisor Monica Brown. If you could look on slide 19, please. Here's the question that does not make sense to me. You have your proposed fiscal year 24-25 almost double, if not more. I didn't do the math because I don't have to teach that anymore. And I do not understand, based on what you've written below, why it would be double. I don't get that. So what am I not understanding? Are the numbers wrong and I didn't get a clarification? Because sometimes that happens. Okay, so please try to explain to me how we've gone from 2.6 million and then in another year it's going to be 4.1. I do not understand the difference and what it is you actually are going to try to do with it. I'm reading about legislative activities and et cetera, et cetera. Is that because it's an election year? I just don't understand.
Those are mostly, we have some regulatory and legislative activities, but also, so it's a cumulative of a lot of additional expenses that we are incurring. One being regulatory and legislative, others like increases in our cloud CCA dues, which is, we had more than $100,000 increase in that line. We also have, in that, we have licenses for CRM, which is our customer relationship management program, our data analytics program, load optimization tools, a lot of technology and analytics infrastructure.
Okay, not to be rude, and I thank you for that. Here's my concern then. Is there a way that we're going to be able to see what the money that you're referring to each of our alphabet soup up there, so that I have some sort of a visual? So when people ask me questions back in Solano County, I am able then to give them that information. If you can tell me where I can find that, that would be great. But as somebody who's looking at probably doing RIF notices this year in Solano County, I'm looking at that going, we're doubling it, and it just does not make sense monetarily in terms of the fact that inflation has not gone that high. So if you could just send me that, I don't know if anybody else wants that information, but I certainly do, as to how to justify doubling in one fiscal year to the next, ma'am. So if you can forward that out and then it can come to at least me, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, I really appreciate the question. And I want to apologize that we did not spell out those acronyms. We should have spelled out CRM and DAP, and I'm so sorry for that. And also CalCCA, I'm so sorry for that. I also wanted to add to what Maida said by just reminding folks and letting our new folks know that we brought our data warehouse in-house to MCE. So we used to be spending a lot of dollars through our data management line item for another entity to handle our customer relationship management tool, our CRM. But we've now brought that in-house, and that has saved us a bit on, paying a vendor to do that, but it's also allowed us to provide much better customer service, because folks that are calling in with questions, it's a member of MCE staff that answers the phone and answers their questions. And we have a wonderful tool now, a software tool that allows us to look up all the information about the customer all in one place and provide great response in real time. So I just wanted to give a little background on what the value is of the funds going into this line item.
And that sounds wonderful, and I appreciate that. But as somebody who has not attended, and we just heard two people who were interested in being involved in some sort of a meeting informal, I think it would be very helpful if we had that type of information or somewhere, because it seems to me that if it was outsourced, having it insourced should not be like a double. I'm just saying, this is my perception as somebody who's just relatively new here, got MCE through Solano County, except for Benicia, bless them, who brought it forward. And I still have half of my county. I know I need to get going too. I have an early morning meeting, but we're talking about a budget. We're talking about a budget when times are going to be very bad coming up. And I think we need to look and make sure that we explain it to everybody. So thank you for your time.
Sure. I would like to also add and invite our Shubo, our VP for Technology and Analytics, so he can speak a little bit more in more details about this budget line item increase.
Thank you, Maida. This is Shubho Chaudhary. I'm the Vice President of Technology Analytics. I'm happy to give more context on this. The specific items here that pertain to my department are the customer relationship management tool, the CRM, and our data analytics platform. As part of MCE's longer term vision, a decision was made to bring in both our relationship management platforms as well as controlling our data. We built out our Azure platform to contain our data and process it. We also have a customer relationship management platform that is no longer dependent on our data manager. The one point I will make here is that while we are bringing this in-house, the savings we are getting does not hit the same line item. So while this line item is going up, there is another line item, our data manager line item, which is not going up. So they're not reflected in the same place, which is why you are seeing this line item go up significantly. But the savings due to this line item going up is not reflected in this line. It is reflected in the data management line. So if you look at other CCAs who also have similar data management needs, they have per unit higher data management costs than we do because we have brought it in-house. I'll stop there. If there's any other questions I can answer, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, a couple quick questions. One was on our data manager line item was 5,136,000. That went up though. I mean, it's not that it didn't go down, but that also went up, didn't it?
It certainly did for this year. However, we made our transition from Calpine, who was our previous data manager, to SMUD, who is our current data manager, a year and a half ago. So I think if you look at that budget, it did go down before it went back up. So it went back up this year because we have some minor additions of additional customers. But when we made the actual transition, there was a fall in our data management costs.
Okay, and just on the technical side, how many customers are in your CRM and what system do you use?
So all of our customers are available in our CRM. We use Salesforce as our basis for our CRM. As most of you know, the CCA community is underserved market. We do not get software that is specifically built for us. The larger companies, SAP, Siemens, they do not build software specifically targeted at CCAs. They generally try to serve the bigger companies like National Grid or PG&E. It means that a lot of the software that we are forced to use does not quite fit what we need or are very expensive for what we need. This is why MCE went through with an initiative to build our own CRM. All of our customers are now available on our CRM, as well as a significant number of the programs that customer programs manages. Over the next year or so, we'll be ascending most programs in the customer programs department into the CRM as well.
Okay, and your analytics is also on force.com on that platform?
No, so the way the stack works is that our data is stored in Microsoft Azure, which is our data warehouse. We use Synapse and Databricks as our analytics tools, and then these feed into our CRM, which is more of a customer management tool. So if you think about it, all the data is stored in Microsoft Azure, and then you can visualize it, use it, and administer it in Salesforce in our CRM.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Clark.
Yes, I just have a comment on this. So how many of you have called the 800 number and you've gotten someone, in Hawaii or wherever, they answer the phone and they know nothing about what you're calling them for? So for MCE to take the customer relationship management and move it in-house means that every given day when one of our customers calls the line, they're getting an MCE employee. What that means is that MCE can track every call. They can make sure that they can actually serve the customer, and they are in the database and they can actually see the customer's billing and account. And it is so important for this organization to be doing that and to have done that. I think in the future, I believe we will realize cost savings. I was part of helping another large organization train and bring on their own staff. And it is so essential to the work of the organization, because when a customer can have a billing issue or a service question answered immediately and with the correct answer, it really changes the nature of that whole relationship. So I'm excited about this. I really am. I think it's a great thing. And I know that in the future, we're going to realize cost savings.
I apologize for interrupting, but that is what I'm talking about. And that could have been added as an asterisk written down. I apologize for everybody to taking the time, but clarifying it is what the whole purpose is to be open and transparent. I'm not trying to be rude here, but you have to understand that there's always going to be constant turnover for people who are sitting there. So my suggestion would be to, anytime this is happening, take what you just told me and everybody else who is rolling their eyes at me, which I'm rolling my own eyes, that you just put an asterisk and indicate what it is that we're getting out of it. That's all I'm asking. I'm just asking for transparency because that is something I constantly work on at the county. We make decisions here at MCE. What is it that we are doing so that everybody understands? Write it down. I'm happy to read. Thank you.
Yeah, and Supervisor, just to clarify, that was Holly Thier. I'm just another director. I'm not staff. But, I've actually had the experience of helping another agency train customer relationship people and then moving those employees into the agency. So no one's rolling their eyes at you. It's all good. And I hope to meet you in person someday.
Yes, Director Wilkinson, go.
I have a comment on compensation. Do you want me to hold that to the end, or you want to raise that now? So no, you're sort of.
Oh, no, that's no, it's fine. You should ask those questions.
Okay.
We're at the end of the overall operating time.
So we did have in the executive committee a detailed conversation around personnel expenses, which have gone up very aggressively, and I wanted to thank Dawn and staff for the very thoughtful responses to mine and Director Fond's questions, which I think were circulated to everybody. And I appreciate the analysis because it is clear that I think compensation per head right now is around $260,000 a head per employee. And I understand the reasons for that, which are that MCE does market comps, compare with other CCAs, and there's competition between the different CCAs. I know all of the other agencies we all represent do similar types of studies, behave in similar ways. There is a difference, though, which is that for most agencies, we're constrained by the tax revenue that we bring in, which grows by 5 or 6% a year. And so that really provides a cap on how much compensation growth we can provide. It's different in the CCA world because the only constraint that CCAs have really is the amount of revenue they bring in, which is determined by the rates that we're willing to set. And so I think we're in this very weird world right now, which Dawn has very clearly expressed, that there's a sort of arms race amongst the CCAs where pay is being inflated and inflated and inflated. And my concern, we are where we are today, and I think that is just correct. And I think this budget from a personnel perspective is fine. But I do think that this is a policy issue. It's a structural problem within the CCAs. And I would certainly encourage staff, possibly in coordination with the executive committee, and bringing in some outside labour market economists and others to really evaluate this issue to see if there's a way to find a solution to slow growth. Because otherwise, if current trends continue in 5 years' time, average compensation is going to be around $500,000 a head, which we cannot go back to our communities and justify that level of compensation. So I know there's a lot of things going on. And again, thank you to staff for all of the information that you provided, but there is a structural issue here. So I do think going forward, it would be good to do a deeper dive into that to see if maybe at the CCA level, there's a way to slow down that growth.
If I could just respond, I want to clarify that so there's not any confusion. I definitely do not feel that there's an arms race going on. I do think that the market in general for folks in the power supply industry is important to track, but I don't think we're seeing increases that are. I wouldn't characterize the issue in the same way that Director Wilkinson just did, which is perfectly fine. I just don't want to have any misrepresentation of the staff's analysis. I also want to make sure folks were able to see the detail in the personnel increases. There are a number of different parts of that line item. Benefits have gone up quite a bit just recently. We were able to keep those rates down for a couple of years during and after COVID, but those have gone up quite a bit. And I do want to point out that in looking at where other load serving entities are in as far as compensation for personnel, MCE is not among the highest. We're actually coming in a bit a bit lower compared to our peers. One of the things that really aligns with our values, though, that I want to highlight is that we do tend to have higher compensation on average for our more entry-level positions. The higher level positions are where we're coming in a bit lower than the norm. But we are always looking at the market to make sure we can recruit and retain the best and the brightest. We do have some vacancies that we're looking to fill using that approach. And we definitely agree that using a third-party analysis, third-party consultants is an important part of keeping track of the market, and that is part of our current practice. So just wanted to clarify that.
Vice Chair, staff member that would like to comment?
Sure, go ahead, Steph. Steph.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's directed towards me. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Director Fong and all the other directors for your comments. I wanted to respond specifically as our proposed funding relates to grants. I work on our strategic initiatives team as an associate, and one of our main goals is to be listening to community members of the jurisdictions that you all serve, and we are continuing to incorporate that into our mission. So I just wanted to reiterate this and emphasize that we're very intentional about the grants that we go after, and the ones that we have secured recently are doing really excellent programming, which hopefully you'll continue to hear about over the next year. And just wanted to clarify that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So I think we're at the, any other comments or anyone? Okay. Okay, so this brings us to our projected change in net position. Net position is simply the number as of after all revenues, non-operating and operating revenues, after all operating expenses and non-operating expenses. Then we have that what's left over. That is our net position. From that, we can do transfers towards other programs. We can defer some of this revenue and so on. But this is sort of the top line of the bottom line numbers, right, before we do other things with our funds. So next slide. And then, so the first, is this your slide or not? Yes, okay. These gone back and forth. I'm confused as to who's speaking about what. Okay. So talking about expenditures and interfund transfers. So if you look at, again, after this net position, we would then, and we'll talk about some proposed transfers into some of these other funds. But the first one would be, say, a transfer of the cost relief program. A little bit of a misnomer, this would just be a bill credit, but it would be an effect on our bottom line in terms of our revenue. So if the board approves the cost relief program at that amount, that would reduce our net position by that amount. Another one we're going to talk about shortly is a transfer to our program development fund of $8.4 million. Again, these are out of the next year's budget. So from a projected number of around $65 million for next year to that net position after these transfers, and before any other deferrals as well, that would be about $52 million to our operating budget, to the operating fund. So just take a second. I want to talk a little about market volatility. Again, talking about next year's budget, regulatory changes and interconnection delays, reduce the renewable energy availability and increase demand and prices. So again, these are projections for cost of energy. And these can be affected by a number of factors, including price spikes related to heat events and so on. And climate change will continue to influence customer demand. Again, we expect to go back to sort of our normal weather patterns for this area, and normal being the average of the last 5 years. But again, we are in the period of climate change, and those changes have been pretty dramatic. So Heat waves and colder winters will lead to increased demand. I'm going to hand it back to Maida to talk about the program development.
Okay. So the program development is attachment C on your packet. And just to get everyone situated where all those numbers that we have it on the screen. So the first column, we have revenue and expenditures that goes into this program. Second column was the approved budget of this current fiscal year. Next one is the projected budget. And the green one is the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. So looking into the revenue portion, we have 8.4 transfer. And this transfer is 50% of the 1 cent kilowatt hour premium for deep green service, and an additional transfer to cover all the expenditures and the programs in the fund. We also have 180,000 coming from Marin Community Foundation. It's another grant. And the expenditure side, we have programs, and those programs are transportation electrification, your building electrification, and also community housing program. I would like to call your attention also on the committed funds line. So when you're dealing with programs, a lot of the expenditures, they get delayed, and we use something that's called committed funds, which means we get the funding, we get the program going, and we get it signed, but we haven't actually spent those funds, and that's what that line of committed fund is. So it's on the pipeline to go, but it hasn't actually happened and actualized into our books. But we have to count for that money. So when it actually happened, we have the money to pay for the programs on the pipeline. So with those two transfers that we have listed and all of the expenditures to fund those programs that we have, we would end the next year with a zero fund balance in the end of the period. Okay, now our next fund is attachment D, and that's the Resiliency VPP Fund. We have, again, it's the same structure, and for revenue, we're not asking any additional funding from MCE operating fund. We have 500,000 coming in for federal earmark funding and 378,000 from Marin Community Foundation grant. We have leftover funds from this year in this fund, so we're not asking additional funding. And the programs are all related to BPP programs, BPP solar storage, Peak Flex, and home area network device pilot program. And in the end, the fund balance, we are expecting to be 640,000 in the end of the next year. Now we're going to talk about our last attachment, attachment E, which is the Energy Efficiency Fund program. The older directors are more used to this fund because we have that for many years. And we have had an extreme growth in this program. So this current fiscal year, the budget was 28.7, and the proposed budget for the next fiscal year is 32.8. I want to call the attention on the middle column that you say projected budget. If you're looking at that, you're probably going to say, why they're not spending this money? No, they are. Actually, we are projecting that all the money, the 28.7, will be spent. It's the same issues that we talked about it before, like the committed funds. So all those funds they are in the pipeline to be spent, but they haven't actually been out, so we can't count them on our books. And it's the same logic of the other grant income and revenue. It has to zero out, so it only comes in when it goes out. And with that, we conclude our presentation today and our recommendation, and that the budget for the fiscal year 24-25 be approved with the 5 million allocation to the target cost relief program.
Thank you very much. Very thorough. Okay, next we will see if any more discussions here, and we'll start here in the Marin office. Any more discussion on this? Yes.
On from Marin Conservation League. I'm from the public. Whether you want me to.
We'll wait on that. Sorry. Let's hear your staff or my apologies. We'll go back to this board here in Marin. We'll go back to any questions there in Concord? Any discussion? Okay, now we will go to comments from members of the public. Oh, excuse me. Director Rice,
Yeah,
go ahead, you have a question.
Is this not one? Thank you. So on one of the early slides, it was the budgeting the cost of energy slide that had the bar chart. Can you go back to that? And I just was wondering you broke out in the current year. Yes, slide 9. No, it's the. And you broke out in the current year what had been budgeted that actually I guess didn't get. So I was just wondering if you could do, I'm just assuming that the proposed budget of 689 million also has some of those subcategories you're building in or not?
It has a little bit of that in contingency. There is some in there, but no, really what is reflective of much more so is that number going back up is a return to the average weather that we've had for the last 5 years. This current year was really a big anomaly. So much so that ISO prices were low, all those reasons. So the big difference is, and a big part of that would bring us back up there is just to go back to regular weather patterns.
Okay, so in the prior year, you had a heat event contingency. So you don't have a heat event contingency in there? Is that what you're saying?
We do not have a heat event contingency specifically. We do have an assumption about cost of some replacement energy and so on but we don't have a full heat event contingency in the budget.
So I'm just trying to understand why in the current year that we're just finishing up, we did build in those contingencies, but we're not building in for the coming year. Well,
Again, there is some contingency in there. And it's, something around, I believe, what's the percentage we have? We're just saying 2%.
It's usually 2%.
Yeah, it's like 2% just for energy costs alone. And, but we don't, for example, we have no projects coming online this year. So we say, okay, those projects are operating. So we don't have that contingency. Our open position situation, there's a little bit of contingency there for some open position. But for the most part, it is pretty straightforward, really based on the big jump back up is just based on
I don't mind it jumping up. I just get it. But you made an analysis and calculation going into last year's budget that you did build in those contingencies. You did I'm assuming you also did an analysis going into this year's budget around some of those events and for whatever the data points are there, you didn't feel the need to build in as large of an open position price risk contingency or you see what maybe I'm not asking the correct.
No, I know what you're asking, and there is some what I want to specifically point out. There is no heat event contingency, and there is some amount, an assumption for higher prices for our open position. There is some amount, but there's no, for example, power supply cost or PPA delay because we don't have any projects coming online.
Okay, that's all. That's what. So you've done that calculus.
Yes.
It's not as if you don't. Okay.
Yes,
that's
absolutely. Yeah.
Director Fong has his hand raised.
Okay, Director Fong, go ahead.
Yeah, and Garth, there's a lot of numbers here and some fairly substantial numbers. And you also commented this, what we're seeing here may be an anomaly to the normal trend because of whatever the factors are. Would it make sense to have a couple of more data points in subsequent budget reviews for, say, previous years other than the year previous, so that we could see what the trends are? And then secondly, a projection, and we'll call it a 5-year projection, as to how these numbers kind of run itself out, so that we can appreciate the what we call the smooth of what you may recommend versus just looking at one data point, which is compared to what may be an anomaly in the numbers. Does that make sense? What I'm asking?
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, know that we do that analysis, right?
Yeah, but you don't show it on the slides. It might be helpful and educational to see how things are trending, so that we can understand if you're looking at a smooth as a recommendation going forward, we could see how you've arrived at that recommendation.
Yeah, Director Fong, this is Vic, and we can definitely look into that in upcoming meetings.
Yeah.
The one thing, and we may have discussed this previously, in the past dozen years or so, we are living at times now that gas prices are at their minimum. So system energy, that is brown power, is dirt cheap, but we don't buy it. What we buy is very expensive, and it's green or greenhouse gas free. So and Director Fong, we can talk a little bit offline too. When we go back in time, we're going to need to convey the system conditions and what was going on in policy, legal, and resources, COVID or not, supply chain issues and things like that on construction. And moving forward, we need to look at some similar variables to make sense, that when we are conveying numbers as to why did we do what we did then, and why we are thinking of doing what moving forward. I hope I'm making sense. It's not like one-to-one relationship. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, I just had a follow-up question to Katie's question, which is maybe the what you're saying, that the current year, the 689 number, that's really based on assumptions around sales volume and the cost of energy. So any of those, would it be accurate to say that any of those, the contingencies are sort of built into the assumption in those terms?
Yes, to a certain degree, yes, absolutely. So yeah, as we said, we expect to go back to selling more energy. We expect to go back to a warmer summer compared to and a colder winter, again, because that's more like the averages we've seen. So in kind of where we are now, right? And again, we had another wet winter. So in some respects, assumption we're going to go back to that is a little bit of a contingency in its own right? So that's kind of how we came to that number. It was a mix of we don't have new projects coming online next year. Even if we have a little bit some heat events, unless it's a very severe one, we probably have enough in that budget to cover that. So on. So didn't want to make it seem like we don't have contingency, but it's just not that very specifically a whole heat event contingent.
No, I think it's just an understanding the calculation that goes into that figure, and to Director Fong's question or request, and then Viken's response. I think what I heard Viken saying is that actually from year to year, it's not always apples to apples, depending on a myriad of things that are happening out, the economy, a COVID, a weather event, what have you.
It's a very, very difficult thing to predict what our costs are going to be, what consumer behavior is going to be, and all that. It's really is. I thought we did a really good job this year, and then everything got normal, whatever that is. Right? Everything, the prices went down, and we had tons of hydro and all these things, and so we just can't assume that's going to happen again. Right, so that just brings us back a little to more like what the original budget for this year was.
Okay, Director Wilkinson.
I just wanted to add to that in terms of Director Fong's comment, because I do think, again, with all these other agencies that we sit on, we generally have a budget planning process where there is a 5-year forecast. And I hear exactly what you're saying, that there's a great deal of uncertainty. But I think you can provide probability sort of distributions around that or different scenarios. But I just think for us as a board, it would be helpful to see our budget projected out 5 years, which is what most of us see with different agencies that we sit on.
Okay.
Director Paulson, you have a question?
Thanks. I know we've mentioned it a few times, but would it be helpful, for example, in the graph that's on the screen, to have to the right the proposed budget actually show the breakdowns of the contingencies? It seems like you could just, have what was there for 2023-24 also broken down. I mean, you've built them in, but you just made it a solid blue bar.
Well, yeah, yes. Although a lot of like the reduced sales, for example, open position stress, so on like that. The heat event contingency is the primary one, and PPA delays and power supply costs. Those were the primary contingencies in this year's budget. The other reduction in energy costs was just related to the weather. And that was by far the biggest change.
So maybe a simpler question, is there, I'm assuming a lot of this is run through, some statistics, is there some, error bars here? Like, do you know, like within a 5% or 95% confidence limit what this budget is?
I think so. John DeLessie, are you on the line? Can you help with some of these questions?
Here we go.
There we go.
A little bit of a delay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, John.
Great. Yeah. So, yeah, in terms of the contingencies and in the uncertainty in the power costs, I mean, it really does depend, as Vicken was getting to, on market conditions. When we were going into the year, a year ago, natural gas prices, power prices, for CAISO Energy were increasing at all-time highs. And then as we got into the year, we had a lot of hydro, gas prices came down, power prices came down. And so we wound up, and we had mild weather. So we wound up with much lower just prevailing market energy prices. And we're now in that environment and moving into the next fiscal year. So there's less risk just because prices are so much lower, and we have that additional hydroelectric supply that should carry us into the summer, right? So, that's where, looking into this current budget, this upcoming year's budget, we didn't feel the need for as many contingencies, primarily because we just seem to be in a better place in terms of the overall grid conditions.
Okay, so maybe just as a request, if you could, in the future, state budget assumptions, and sort of prioritize, enumerate risk, because I think the variances, in last year is something, it'd be nice to foresee what now. I mean, I understand the weather, there is no great way to predict that. Energy costs could change, economics, imports, et cetera. So I'm a little unclear how much confidence to put in that number.
Chair Quinto, this is Director Murphy from Concord. Can you add me to the queue?
You're next. Go ahead.
Wonderful. I'd love to make a motion if that's okay.
We have a couple of questions we're not coming here yet.
Okay, so there is a queue. Okay, add me to the bottom of the list if you can.
Okay.
There's a staff member that would like to comment.
Okay, go ahead, staff. You had a comment.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think just one thing that I would like to add to the conversation is that MCE is still building its long-term portfolio. And the way, to describe our portfolio right now is divided into, long-term contracts that are fixed price. And then there's a lot of short-term contracts that we do that are more exposed to the short-term prices that tend to be more volatile. So I think until the time we're able to really build our long-term contracting portfolio, I think you will see this volatility from year to year, that we're, because we are in the short-term market. So I think I just wanted for everyone to know, how or why, we see this volatility from year to year. And that's part of the reason. And Garth explained, there are other reasons as well, but I think that is also a big part of the reason. And that's why it's also hard to predict what that market would look like in 2 years from now, 3 years from now, because it does vary quite a bit from year to year.
And if I could add, we are going to have a discussion in the next agenda item about a capital projects fund that would help reduce some of the volatility by allowing MCE to own some projects and kind of start out with ownership that would help expose us a bit less to the volatility in the market.
Okay, next, Director Fong, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. And I apologize. I dropped off. I ran out of power here in Hong Kong. The only comment I would have is to support, the concern about volatility is that's maybe another reason why having a few extra or a few more data points of previous, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever the case might be, would demonstrate a trend of activity and cost that would really provide not only historical, but current and possibly even future trends, so that at least we can explain all that to our respective jurisdictions, because clearly all they see is the one previous year. They don't know if that was the norm, if it was not the norm. But I think we could tell our story much better if we had a few more data points representing a few more years, so that we see what the trend is, what the smooth is, but more importantly, where there are significant variances and how we can explain out those variances as well.
Now we have public comment here. Go ahead, sir. This will be quick.
I'm Ken Strong from the Marin Conservation thing. And speaking to the Program Development Fund, we're pleased to see the increase allocation this year, and we think that's great, putting aside the question of whether there should be some more, which is really more of a agenda item 7 topic than this. The one thing we would like to see is, in the past years, not all the money's been spent a number of times, and it's been hard to track that. We would love to see quarterly reports on the spending made to the technical committee and to maybe Compow, if there are meetings of those, and also something that ties GHG impacts to some of these programs, because it's hard to know which one would really be the most beneficial. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? In Concord, I'm sorry, we had a comment from Director. Concord. Okay. Okay, Director Murphy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make a motion. My motion is I'd move to approve the proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget as per staff recommendation, with the additional approval of the targeted cost relief program with an allocation of $5 million.
And I will second that, Director Wren.
So we have a motion by Director Murphy. I'm sorry, who was second from?
Be Director Wren, Pleasant Hill.
Okay, very good. Madam Clerk.
Belvedere?
Yes.
Venetia?
Yes.
Concord?
Yes.
Contra Costa County?
Yes.
Puerto Madera?
Yes.
Danville?
Yes, with the understanding and supporting the advocacy for more transparency and significant variances that might be represented by budgets from year to year and what's being proposed.
Thank you. El Cerrito?
Yes.
Fairfax?
Yeah.
Hercules?
Yes.
Lafayette?
Yes.
Larkspur?
Yes.
Tanya Marin?
Yes.
Martinez?
Yes, and thank you for sharing your screen as we're voting.
Fairfax.
Mill Valley?
Yes.
City of Napa,
I sent this
Yes.
to you. PCDC program.
County of Napa,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like Christmas.
You're on. County Napa.
County Napa, yes.
thank you. Oakley,
Yes.
Pinal,
Yes.
Pleasant Hill,
Yes.
Richmond,
Yes.
San Anselmo,
Yes.
San Pablo,
Yes.
Sausalito,
Yes.
Solano,
Yes.
Broad,
Very enthusiastically, yes.
thank you. Vallejo,
Aye.
Yes.
are there any board members that were not present for roll call that I missed? This item requires 20 votes to pass, and we have 31 yeses, so motion carries.
Michelle.
Okay. Well done. Thank you very much. Next, item 7 is the fiscal year 23-24 update, projections and discussion of those transfer and deferrals. We will continue to hear from the finance team. Please proceed.
This Vic, and again, I just wanted to mention, so this is only a discussion item, and we're bringing this as hopefully for some good discussion on what are the staff's thoughts on any upcoming transfers and deferrals with a possible new fund. So just let you know that our intent is to engage in a bi-directional meeting with the Community Power Coalition first, and then bring the results of the discussion and the thoughts to TechCom, XCOM, and to the board again for consideration. So Garth, take it away, please.
Thank you, Victor. So next slide. So as you know, there's a board approved reserve policy, and that sets the goals for the targeted net position that I mentioned earlier at 60% of operating and non-operating expenses, and sets goals for liquidity at 240 days cash on hand. And you know, with this year's results, and certainly after next year's results, we assuming no deferrals, we do expect to hit those targets. The board has also approved the creation and funding of an operating reserve fund. An operating reserve fund utilized by many other entities, often called a rate stabilization fund, and ours is no different in that regard. It is an opportunity to defer revenue in a year to be utilized in a future year. And this rate stabilization fund can be used to mitigate fluctuations in costs, or that can affect budget outcomes, and also to potentially forego a rate increase that we might otherwise have to have if we didn't have these sort of revenues in the bank. Next slide. So the deferrals in the operating reserve fund, they reduce the revenues in the current fiscal year, but they put them aside for possible use in a future year to mitigate or prevent a rate increase, as mentioned, fulfilling a debt or bond covenant if we have debt outstanding and we have what's called a coverage requirement, and we're required to cover that debt or net revenues by a certain amount, and we come up short for some reason, we actually could use these revenues to meet that covenant and avoid a rate increase. And it can also address a sudden increase in costs, such as heat wave or other disruption. So we could use it, for example, if we had a severe heat wave and then severely impacted revenues, we could, in a given year, we could actually utilize this fund, these deferred revenues, to cover that. Okay, a deferral into the operating reserve fund does reduce the addition to net position, but it doesn't reduce our liquidity. We have that money, we have that cash when we do that. It's more of an accounting treatment, but it's one that's utilized all around in the industry, in the utilities, water utilities in particular. We've successfully deferred $30 million so far over the past 4 years. We deferred amounts in 3 of the years, and 1 year we didn't defer any money because we didn't really have a whole lot of a net position that year. The cap under the policy is 80 million, which is 10% of our operating reserves. I'm sorry, operating revenues, and not operating revenues. So staff will come back and for the board to consider recommending an additional deferral from our current year's revenues into the operating reserve fund. So we'll come back to the board for consideration sometime, probably in May. I'm gonna hand it over to Vika now to talk a little bit about where the agency is in terms of fiscal discipline and some of our plans going forward.
Sure. Thank you, Garth. So we're on slide. Yeah. So this is just to kind of give a summary about what have we been doing in this specific area on financial strength and discipline over the past 6 years. We systematically came up with a plan to approach this. So we first started working on getting investment grade credit ratings. We adopted with the board a reserve policy on to meet reserve and liquidity targets. We created the operating reserve fund. The board approved the investment policy. And also we retained financial advisors, bond counsel, and we have a flexible bond indenture and a debt policy. Now, all these were to build us towards having the financial discipline and the capability to actually own something, power plants primarily, to start reducing our risk in this so-called market about RA and energy and GHG-free resources, and possibly even in transmission assets that we're seeing significant curtailments. Recently, we even got the credit facility to a $60 million credit facility, AA credit rated bank. Next slide, please. Okay, on the risk mitigation measures, what we need to work on is, and you have heard this before, board. So supply chain issues had significantly increased our cost with the contractor negotiations and cancellations. Like you heard in this fiscal year's budget, there was over a $16 million deposit. If you heard it right, that was for a cancellation of a contract. That we got that money that we're gonna need to spend probably more than that to get what we lost in not getting the contract in the resource adequacy world. So we have heard before that renewable energy costs have quadrupled. Transmission congestion and long-term lead times are creating significant cost increases. Just to give for the third bullet, just to give a perspective of it, we have over 18,000 megawatts of solar installation activity under California ISO crew. In summertime, even these days, it is not unforeseen to see 4,000 or 5,000 megawatts of curtailments of that solar. But we, as other CCAs and load-serving entities, need to pay for that solar that is being curtailed and then go and buy more in the market to fill in the lost energy. So that's a double whammy, in addition to having congestion curtailments. And lastly is the resource adequacy cost that has gone through the roof. Next slide, please. So this is our thoughts. We wanted to share with you again for discussion purposes, a creation of capital project funds. This is something very similar, if not duplicative, a mirror image, I should say, to what a lot of cities and counties and jurisdictions have to create to do investments. And our intent is to own a greenhouse gas-free green generation asset, possibly own transmission asset that is tied to one of our long-term power purchase agreements or the location of the purchase that we will do for ownership. And the other thing is, the third bullet is to own our own office building, especially the real estate market is just like any market. It goes up and down, and there are good times, there are bad times, but we feel that there are some good deals out there that we may want to pursue and probably eliminate quite a big chunk of our ongoing lease payments that you saw in the budget that you just approved. So the other thing we were talking about, maybe it was Director Fong was asking about tax law changes that what we are doing. So the investment tax credit is 30% of a purchase from a load serving entity tax, like our JPA, that for every $100 we spend on ownership, $30 will get back from taxes that previously we did not. This was something exclusively to for-profit entities that we are very interested in getting that for us. And better certainty, we have about 1,250 megawatts of load, and about 600 megawatts of it is like base load. Really interested in start filling up the 24/7 load, bring to the board 24/7 clean product. How do we start filling that, right? And what we are asking is definitely not the ultimate goal, is just a solid, good start, a good signal to send to all the third parties that really are not interested to make CCAs more independent, in my opinion. But we want to be able to go and start owning things that we need to rely on for our customers' reliability, certainty of rates, and financial strength for a very long time. And Garth, is this mine, or do I take it back to you? Slide 7.
Oh, yeah, I'll pick it up from here, Vic, thank you. So,
Okay. Oh, you want me to continue going? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Garth, the vote is to go move quickly.
Okay.
Very quickly.
All right, people are getting tired. All right, I get it. So,
Sorry, Garth, just a minute, there's a question.
Everyone in Concord wants to keep going. I just want to, I wasn't wearing my glasses and I put them on and I saw transmission assets on the last slide.
Yes.
So we're actually talking about building our own transmission and therefore removing the need to partner with PG&E.
Oh.
Is that like the long-term?
Oh, I wish I could say yes. I wish, really. I'm not talking about distribution, please.
Okay.
Let's be that very clear. Not interested in distribution. This is under California ISO FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission approved tariff. There are merchant transmission line allocations. What we have been working on is the first entity ever to use that criteria to request, work with the ISO and work with our investor-owned utility PG&E to have a specific transmission line or a transmission facility that will facilitate, if not eliminate, congestion for a specific power plant that we have a contract with. So to do what you just, I love that vision. I love it. But we're not talking about spending tens of billions of dollars. We just can't. But it's a step in the right direction. If it's costing us $100 to eliminate, if it's costing us $100 in congestion, but the fix would be less than $100, we are interested with the fix. Did I answer you? Okay.
Can I just have
one more question?
One quick question.
Yeah.
So there's two ways for us to acquire an asset. We could either do the development process or buy somebody else's asset. Are you thinking of a combination of those?
Both.
Because the risks associated with developing can get a little scary, and so.
Yeah. So there are, we're looking at opportunities in land, availability of water in case we want to go to green hydrogen development. We're looking at access to transmission, how close it is.
Mm-hmm.
There are some places that are close. Is it greenfield or brownfield? I'm very sensitive to the of the difference. We're looking at everything.
So you're
It's
open
not
to
the knee-jerk
things.
reaction.
You're just going to measure risk versus reward on the different pathways.
Additional workload, risk, awards, but the ultimate goal is the certainty to our customers, to ourselves, and reliability and rate management.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. No other questions in Concord.
Any questions here, Director Wilkins?
I have a question and a comment, and the comment is that I think this is an interesting exploration for MC to look at, but there's obviously a huge amount of risks of all of the things that you're suggesting here, whether it's commercial real estate risk from owning the building, or wildfire risk from owning lines, or operational risk from owning assets. And so there's a lot to consider as to whether investing money in a fund right now makes sense before those things have been more seriously explored, or whether the agency instead should be considering reducing rates, which would be potentially the alternative. And given how much pressure consumers are feeling, that I think those should be considered in parallel with each other, because that's the choice that essentially we would be making, given that we've reached our reserve goal. So that was my comment. And the question was, why is the meeting with Community Power Coalition? Because that's the CCAs, correct? That's the group of CC. Oh, I don't know who they are, so maybe you could explain that.
Go ahead.
The Community Power Coalition is a group of community advocates throughout our service area that we meet with regularly to talk about all kinds of programs and solicit feedback. And we would like to we would like to meet with them to discuss all of this and solicit feedback as well. So
Do they have expertise in asset ownership or?
no. I may have missed the first part of your question, but just explaining, the Community Power Coalition is a group of local advocates. They represent environmental organizations, variety of community organizations, and their interest is simply in how MCE reinvests and benefits our local communities.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Oh, hi. Thank you for the presentation. One of the questions that I had is if you have a sense for which of these options might correlate to the most, kind of greenhouse gas reductions, particularly in times when the grid is dirtier. To me, that feels like a really important consideration in thinking about, the direction that the different directions that we might move. And I was just wondering what sort of, and I realize there might be some that are, nth order kind of reductions, if there's savings here that could translate to something else over here, that kind of stuff. But just any insight you have, and then any thoughts on, how that could factor into future discussions around this.
So I'll take a first crack at that. So I think our options are, all options are on the table. I think, and obviously we will need to do the whole risk reward analysis. Probably the most straightforward thing for MCE to do in terms of ownership is, when we have experience, which is solar plus storage, which, is with the one that our PPA now has just been tremendously successful in trying to do the things we want to do. And so that is one that we would, that would be high on our list, right? But as Dickens says, we haven't made any kind of decisions. We're going to look at everything and determine, again, what the highest and best use of a project ownership is going to be. So, as I said, but I think solar plus storage is the most straightforward. It's existing. We have a PPA, and so that's probably pretty high on the list. But as I said, I think everything is on the table.
Yes, Director Paulson. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you?
I have a quick follow-up, which is, I guess, as Dr. Wilkins laid out, the other option could be to reduce rates. I'm curious about if there's a way also to use some of this funding to invest in like demand reduction, which could happen through, I don't know, greater efficiency or that kind of stuff. But I kind of along the lines of, I'm really interested in cleaning up, the dirtier hours to the extent possible. And I guess one way to do that is demand reduction as well.
Yeah, absolutely, that's as well. And I did want to sort of comment on the notion that we use reserves to reduce rates. I mean, the idea of owning a power project is a long-term thing that's going to bring rate certainty, and presumably if we do it correctly, it's going to reduce our costs, which will have an effect on rates. So that really is, that really is the idea. This is not a, a short-term strategy to necessarily to use reserves to reduce rates in the near term, because we still have that cost problem, right? So that's really what we're thinking much longer term on this, and really trying to manage the volatility that we're experiencing. As Vicken says, start slow but continue to build on that base load that we need, so that we're really, for the most part, tinkering with the margins, if you will. So again, I just want to make sure that we're thinking long term about this, and the value to our customers in terms of lower costs, which would allow us to reduce rates. Because right now we are in many respects responding to the cost signals that we're seeing.
Right, and I guess, sorry, just to clarify, I definitely understand the difference between short-term sort of relief versus long-term cost reduction, which is much more structural, and I think makes more sense, frankly, in terms of looking at this. But the other piece is, if we think of going back to the bar graph slide, is it's not just the cost of energy, but it's also the volume of sales. And so I'm wondering about ways to reduce demand essentially, and have a lower, not just a lower cost per unit of energy, but a lower overall that might also help meet certain types of goals.
Yeah, and much of what we talk about in these individual funds, the local project fund, the VPP, that is all doing, and especially the energy efficiency fund, right? That is precisely what that's addressing. So you're absolutely correct. It's a combination of things. It's working on the demand as well, working on those peak hours, trying to address that, but also on the cost side to serve that demand. So I think that you're absolutely right. So yes.
Yeah, this Vicken, really appreciate the question, and thank you, Garth, for the answer. We are almost completing with the specific vice presidents at MCE. We're going to bring to you, to TechCom and XCOM, into the board, a 10-year virtual power plant vision for our footprint. And you will see a whole array of demand response, load shift, value development that we are working on, that we're really looking forward to share it with you. So that will go a long way to answering maybe some of the questions, but thank you again for that.
Director Paulson, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. I realize we're at the beginning of this conversation, but I'm curious if there are any other CCAs that have best practices or success stories in this kind of reinvestment that you found.
Well, MCE has traditionally been the leader in most of these things, and so there is one CCA that's doing smaller scale in service area projects. We're talking like 10, 20 megawatts or so, but we're not aware of anyone that is at this point, kind of leading the charge. MCE, the other CCAs call us all the time. What's your debt policy look like? What is your? I think many of them are going in this direction, but as is what's happened sort of traditionally is that we're kind of leading the charge right now. But so as a consequence, we need to be careful and step carefully. But there is no best practices in the CCA area right now.
Okay, Director Kohler, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Well, this is very intriguing. It seems to me that it's got a lot of risks and liabilities associated with it. And along with, as you proceed down this road, I guess there's two parts to it. One is potentially owning the building in San Rafael, and the other part, which to me is a bigger risk. I'm wondering if there's been any consideration to forming an ad hoc committee to work on each of those aspects separately, potentially, rather than just, and I think the technical committee and the executive committee do great work, but I think we really need to dig into particularly the idea of owning something, and transmission lines to me are quite scary. So I'm just making that suggestion, and I realize it's long-term. But Vicken, I have a question for you. When you say long-term, how long-term is long-term? Are you thinking 10 years from now, 2 years from now? What is kind of in your mind?
Yeah. Well, that's a really great question, Barbara. That, you know, I would love to have MCE send a signal with a positive vote of this funding and fund this fund that basically says MCE is serious to own a power plant and transmission line. Transmission line, it's going to be very difficult for us to grow in because that is a huge moneymaker for the IOUs, and they'd rather not, to be honest with you. All the munis combined together, they couldn't do much for 50 years. So let alone what we're going to be able to do. So that's a very tough hill to go because it comes with a federal 12.5% annual bonus for if no one uses your transmission line. So the IUs have a lock on that, and they are not giving it away, and they're not getting any competition in that, even from companies that can build transmission in the state of California. And you know about how long the queues are. Now, that is a long shot, but we have some issues with significant curtailments that we need to find a fix. As far as power plants, if we can do it, it will be long-term. I would say probably 20 years to fill our base load, our varying load, to be in the market in the varying portion of the load. And as we flatten our resources with demand response, VPP, microgrids, everything under the sun to go to greenhouse gas-free green resources with stable rates, reliable rates, and not these shock waves that we go through in the market. If we can, let's say our base load today is 600 megawatts per year. If we are lucky enough to bring in every 3 to 4 years a 50 megawatt resource, that will take 30 years. That will take a long time to fill today's base load, let alone tomorrow's base load. So, the Director Kohler, it's a long-term is really long-term. But to me, the important portion is the dedication that this board can do, the signal this board can send to the third parties that have a lock-in generation to say MCE gonna start becoming an owner to reduce our risk and have more certainty. I hope I did not ramble on too much, and I hope I answered your question, Barbara.
Well, yeah, kind of. I guess it's more a wait and see, and I have a lot of concerns, and I do think we ought to really take a look at, and this is a little separate, but in reducing rates more, because we know that California, and particularly PG&E service area, has the highest rates in the country by 2 to 3 times. And so, CCAs in the old days were really just looking at cost efficiency, not at what we're doing now, which is incredible with GHG-free and renewables. So I think if we could make a dent in our service area as far as reducing rates further, using some of our reserves, I think that would go a long way. People are really hurting, even people with moderate incomes. So just something to think about, and I'll stay tuned and appreciate your response and appreciate the presentation.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Director.
More to talk.
I know it's a really good question, Vic, and from my understanding, what does that setting up this fund sends a signal to the owner of these assets? What is that signal? What is that economic signal?
The economic signal or the financial signal is that MCE is serious in this area, and we're going to work on it.
What does that mean in terms of their behavior?
I'm sorry.
What does that mean in terms of their behavior? If sending a signal, there has to be a behavioral response.
To the developers.
But what exactly? But how does it change their behavior?
Oh, they're not going to change their behavior. What I'm saying, they have no reason to change their behavior. They're holding the load-serving entities hostage. That it's clearly shown in the price what they were paying. By finding entities that we can work with to have a turnkey project, let's say, that we could own if we're lucky enough, that will reduce our risk and increase our certainty in rate making and stability in budget.
Yeah, no, I understand that, Vic, and it was just you said setting up this fund will send a signal.
Yeah.
But to whom are you signaling and for what purpose?
The financial institutions, banks, bonding agencies that we have a great rapport with, and developers that saying, oh, MCE wants to own, so we can develop and sell it to them. So they are actually, the board is taking a position in creating a fund actually to do this.
Okay.
I mean, it's one thing we can do this anyway without setting up a fund, but just coming to the board saying there's a $500 million opportunity that needs a minimum $50 to $100 million cash deposit. And we're going to need to go and get a bonding done to create $400 million of debt that altogether is less than what we are paying for that power plant through a PPA. We could do that too, but that's not the way to do it, to do controlled expansion into a marketplace that does not have CCAs playing in it yet.
Point of order, please. This
Yeah.
is Director Birdseye from Benicia. I would like to move to finish the presentation. We have 7 slides left that could possibly answer some of these questions.
Let's go ahead.
Okay. So the benefits of deferrals and transfers. So we want to talk about a little bit about the operating reserve fund. And again, we put 30 million in this fund, and the staff will come back to the board for consideration of another deferral. And the ORF can shield against some of these spikes, price spikes and other negative budgetary impacts. Again, we can use it to satisfy a bond covenant or other financial covenants and avoid a possible mandatory rate increase. Asset ownership for stability. Again, if we decide to apply some reserves towards generating storage assets, that can help us lock in price certainty, enhance operational optimization, and increase CAISO revenues and RA value. And as mentioned, the Inflation Reduction Act allows MCE to now take advantage of the tax credits. We get direct pay there for that amount, which allows us to effectively compete as well with developers on that price, because we can also get that benefit. So this is a look at kind of where we are in our reserve goals. So with no further deferrals, including deferrals, for example, into the program development fund, that we expect to basically hit our reserve target for this year, and then next year exceed it by like 11% or so, based upon the current projections for the rest of this year and for the budget for next year. On liquidity, we do expect to, again, because for those deferrals, we actually have the funds. In addition, our liquidity also takes into account our $60 million line of credit. So we expect we will hit our liquidity target this year, and certainly be above it next year if we have net revenues next year. Next slide. So this is a look at where we would be with a hypothetical $30 million deferral into the operating reserve fund and $50 million deposit into a capital projects fund. Again, as long as we have that cash, that 50 million, we have the cash. So, but if you were to say we were going to spend the full 50 million and defer the 30, we would actually be about 82% of our reserve target. And then next year, given projected revenues, with no additional deferrals other than the ones just mentioned, we'd be about 93%. And then for the next slide, for liquidity, again, even with a 50 million, the deferral, again, we have the liquidity. So with a $50 million spend on capital projects, we'd still hit our liquidity goal this year and be above it next year. So the fiscal impacts and the final impacts will be determined after the 23-24 results are available sometime in May or June, is actually by the end of the fiscal year. It takes a little bit longer to get final numbers. We'll have April, and maybe not each month, by the way, but we tend to have April and May meetings with the Community Power Coalition, and also the Technical Committee and Executive Committee. And again, staff may come back to the board to discuss and consider a deferral into the operating reserve fund and potentially initial funding of capital projects. And this was an information item, so no votes or anything on this.
Very good. Thank you very much. Just want to go back to Director Ray. Did you have one last question? Say your hand up earlier.
Yeah, it was just a comment on the previous conversation that we've picked up in the subsequent slides. I think it's a good move to set up a fund. I agree with Viken's assessment that bringing individual items could get cumbersome, and we could end up having to have meetings simply to approve moving on things that were time constrained. So I support staff's recommendation to set up a fund to then move forward on the asset. I also liked Director Kohler's suggestion that we set up one or more subcommittees or committees distinct from executive and technical to look at assets in a more detailed manner, similar to what we have, for example, with the audit committee.
Very good, thank you. Now I believe we have one public comment. We have two. So, go ahead, sir.
Thank you.
I'm Dan Segadin, Deep Green user, Larkspur resident. As an ex-board chair of Marin Community Clinics, I had the pleasure of working with the MCE staff on a solar project and battery project on our facilities. So at any rate, getting to the topics today, three thoughts: possibilities, information, and process. What we're really talking about is how to spend a fair bit of money. You're seeing a proposal here to add the reserves by another name, the operating fund reserve, and then to another reserve for capital improvements. There's a lot of possibilities. You've heard some of them: demand management, you've heard rate reduction, and so on. I think the board should view this in a wider context of here's all the possibilities and not just here's the two proposals on the table. That's the first thing. We need a lot of information to do this. There is, for instance, as was mentioned previously, no greenhouse gas reduction information about these programs, how much they're reducing greenhouse gases. We're kind of flying blind when we allocate resources or as advocates trying to express preferences because we really don't know the greenhouse gas reduction of these programs, et cetera. So there's kind of a little bit of an information void. We're flying a little blind there. And then finally, in terms of process, as someone who's participated in the community power meetings and so forth, I'll just say that given the complexity of this, given all the possible options for uses of funds, you saw the programs, you know about 24/7, you know about we could increase the renewable energy targets, you could return to ratepayers, which ones, a lot of complexity. I don't think a couple meetings with community power or even with technical committee and executive committee is going to do it. So I support what's been mentioned here by a couple other directors, that there's some type of ad hoc committee formed to look at how to allocate this surplus in a much broader manner than just the two buckets that have been proposed here. Thank you for your time.
Ken Strong again from Marin Conservation League. We've followed MCE and supported for a long time, since its founding. We've been watching the reserves build over the last several years as you're getting towards your net, increasing the net position. And we began engaging with MCE staff last fall as we were seeing us getting close to this target. How MCE chooses to use its reserve funds this year may well predetermine how similar transfers happen in the future. Because we've heard allusions to, in this, particularly with the asset acquisition fund, that you want to own a power plant. You can't own a power plant for $50 million. They're much more expensive than that. And my assessment is that if you start down this road, you're going to be putting significant dollars in there for many, many years. Several other CCAs over the past year reached sort of this same place. Peninsula Clean Energy, they had funds to explore allocating, and they made a number of different choices. And we think MCE, its board, and its community need to thoroughly look at all of the choices that are available. What we request is that MCE create a robust, inclusive allocation process as to how you might use this money. We think a timeline needs to be longer than the couple of months trying to bring something back at the May meeting in order to explore these issues. A really good model is Peninsula Clean Energy formed an ad hoc surplus funds committee. And the Peninsula Clean Energy Community Advisory Committee was involved. The PCE ad hoc committee had board members, it had staff, and it had community members on it. They met many times, my understanding is 6 times over 4 months. They looked at issues in great depth. They also set up a set of metrics against which they measured the various options, including GHG reduction / resilience impact, customer impact, PCE awareness, reputational benefit, newer existing programs, staff level of effort. So they had it, you don't have to use those metrics, but metrics are a good way to measure things. We want you to look at programs and uses of the money that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Through innovative community energy programs for electrification, local generation to demand management, procuring hourly matching renewable energy to load. And if you want to create equitable community benefits, then targeted rate relief along the lines of accelerating that cost recovery program is a good way to go. Those would be accomplish your mission to confront the climate crisis by eliminating fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions, producing renewable energy.
I think you're 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, next speaker is David Muller. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, thanks you so much. So again, David Muller here. I'm with the Marin Sonoma Building Electrification Squad and Marin Sonoma Electric Vehicle Squad. I spoke a little bit earlier during the public comment period about setting up a community advisory committee. So I'd like to comment on the subject of MCE's operating reserve fund, which appears from the staff report we've heard will likely meet its target amount this year. But before I comment on it, I want to congratulate MCE for achieving this milestone. It's a big deal. As to what comes next, rather than arbitrarily transferring a portion of the reserve fund to a capital projects fund and then continuing to defer any surplus revenues to the now depleted reserve fund, as proposed by staff, we'd like to recommend MCE first engage in a robust community education and engagement process, and as others have commented, establish an ad hoc working group made up of board, staff, and community representatives to collaboratively develop a range of options for any transfers from the reserve fund and any allocation of surplus revenues. This group would be much more focused than the Community Power Coalition. The goal would be to make any transfers and to allocate any surplus revenues where they'll have the greatest impact on achieving the 3 objectives of MCE's stated mission to confront the climate crisis by 1, eliminating fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions, 2, producing renewable energy, and 3, creating equitable community benefits. It seems likely that the outcome of such a community process will be a range of actions, potentially including a capital projects fund to acquire renewable generation assets as proposed by staff, but it would also likely include additional actions such as targeted rate reduction for Carafera customers, perhaps better matching renewable gen to better match load on a 24/7 basis, and most importantly, targeted greenhouse reduction through a more robust community electrification program to further accelerate the transition from fossil fuels to electricity for buildings and transportation. MCE has some great models to draw on. It's already been mentioned. Peninsula Clean Energy actually established a public advisory committee and working group specifically to help identify how to spend surplus revenues, and as a result has initiated and sponsored numerous community electrification programs. With the meeting of its reserve targets, MCE has a major opportunity to really do even more to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, produce renewable energy, and create equitable community benefits consistent with this mission. We respectfully request that MCE embrace an all of the above approach.
Thumbs up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go to our next speaker, Fred Bialy. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Fred Bialy, and I live in El Cerrito, Contra Costa County. I'm active with a number of organizations in our county that are concerned about the worsening climate emergency and that advocate for policies that decrease greenhouse gas emissions. In particular, we're focused on speeding up the electrification of buildings and transportation, the two biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in our county. So I want to address this proposal to reduce MCE's current reserves by $80 million by deferring some of this money to the operating reserve fund and transferring some of the money to a yet to be created capital projects fund. I think the rationale for both these actions is very compelling, but I want to urge the board, though, to also consider other uses of these reserve funds. We need to expand community programs that will accelerate for all residents the transition away from fossil fuels over to fully electrified buildings and transportation. We also need to prioritize ways to meet the electricity load needs with renewable energy around the clock. So I feel that the board should solicit broad community input in setting funding priorities for its reserves. I want to support the recommendations made earlier in the evening about establishing a community committee to provide such input. MCE could follow, as already been mentioned, Peninsula Clean Energy's lead, which established a community advisory board that meets monthly and provides valuable insight and guidance on many initiatives. It also advocates in the community for PCE's goals and programs. Such a community group would be an asset to MCE and its board. So thank you for the time to speak.
Thank you very much, Fred. We'll go to Bonnie Hamilton. Go next.
Hello, good evening again. Bonnie Hamilton. I am a resident of Solano County and live in Fairfield. Appreciate the work that MCE does, and I want to speak in reference to MCE's operating reserve fund, and that I agree with the previous speakers that MCE consider using the reserve fund and any surplus monies to produce more renewable energy and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and further create equitable community benefits as previously stated. And I strongly agree with having a community advisory committee with a work group that would help identify how to best spend these monies. I lead a climate policy action group here in Solano County, and we are very concerned about what's happening with our climate, and particularly here in Solano County, which is we're downwind of 5 refineries, and MCE is not fully penetrated in our county. We've worked to have MCE more fully penetrated into our county. So would really appreciate having more say in what happens with your reserve. Thank you very much for your time, and it's been a long evening for everyone. So thank you again, and good night.
Thank you very much. Next is our last item, which is board and staff matters. Are there any board or staff matters to discuss?
Chair, this is Vicken again. Sorry, I just want to take a minute. I just want to recognize Don and all the staff that had spent significant amount of time and effort to put all these presentations and the data. I know we have some homework to do. We heard a lot of creative ideas on how to move forward, but I just want to say that I'm really proud of our staff and the amount of work and the way they work and the way they engage in the community and how much we give back. So thank you all, and thank you, board, for hearing us, challenging us with good questions to do better. But thank you. Really appreciate it.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, next, we're going to adjourn this meeting, but before I adjourn this meeting, I want to say thank you to here in the Marin office, and that's Tamara, and to Daniel for all the work that you've done. Tanya, yeah, forgive me, for all the work that you've done beyond the call of duty for all this last minute hiccups, but you made it ran very, very smoothly. We're going to end this meeting at 9:33 p.m. Have a good evening. Good night.